started. Thank you everyone for coming. Welcome to the last panel of the day. I think this is becoming a trend actually with our panels.
Está metiendo ahí, ¿eh?
It's DAOs and governance design.
Se
My
me
name
está
is
metiendo
Anna,
de otro lado. El
and I'm
micro lo
joined
tengo
today
cerrado y
by
está entrando.
four
A
amazing,
ver.
like three
No,
amazing,
está bien, perdón. Está correcto. Nada,
amazing panelists. We have Juan, Meg, and Harry.
nada.
And today we're going to talk about a really interesting topic about DAOs and governance, and I'll tell you a little bit of a backstory for kind of how I got really interested in this and why I find this really compelling. So I currently lead community programs at the Cell Foundation, but previously I was part of the Maker community. First started as a community contributor through their grants program, and then later on got hired to work for the foundation to run some of those and lead some of those programs that during the time that the foundation went through a massive transition from foundation to the DAO. And so that's when I became really, really interested in DAOs and how does this work and how does this how does this lead us to future work and what are some positives and negatives with DAOs and governance? So really excited to dive into this topic. I'll let each of the panelists introduce themselves first and tell us a little bit about how you got into DAOs and why you find it really compelling.
Thank you, Anna. My name is Juan mainly from MakerDAO. I joined Maker from the community side, I don't know, 100 years ago. Discovered it through first I discovered DeFi, then I discovered Maker. And it's like, oh, our community calls are open. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I'll just join. And then I just started like sticking around and getting more involved. And at some point I was like, hey, come in and join. So I joined right when Maker was when the Maker Foundation was dissolving. So there was a lot to build from the community side. So that's where I helped the most. It's funny how looking backwards, we have a lot of the lessons learned or the mistakes that we try to not replicate to the rest of the industry. But that's a bit what we're working on right now, trying to make the space better. So yeah, hopefully this panel and talk a bit about that too.
Hi, I'm Meg. I'm the VP of DAO operations at Flipside Crypto, and I work full-time in Metrics DAO. I've been in crypto for about 2 years now. Before this, I spent my career in ad tech and marketing, and I got to a point where I was like, this sucks. Like, my job is to make Google and Facebook more money, and they're evil, and I hate it. And someone was like, well, if you really want to change, have you heard of this crypto thing? And so I got into crypto and I was like, this is fine. But then someone introduced me to DAOs and I was like, ooh, this is amazing. I've never worked with such inspiring and motivated people. And so I went down the DAO rabbit hole by joining Index Co-op, later serving on the council there, and then helping Flipside incubate Metrics DAO. And I'm super excited to learn from all of the other amazing panelists here.
Yeah, great to meet you all as well. I'm Harry. I've been working at Aragon. I've been working in community projects for the last 10 years. So how do you get groups of people to work together for some kind of social good outcome? So I got really excited when DAOs came along and I got into Aragon because of that. And I've been learning how you have kind of the protocol side, which have, quite specific governance needs. But then I've also been looking at how do you bridge that to mainstream use cases outside of crypto protocols, and the governance needs there will be very different. So at Aragon this year, I've been working on products for each side of that spectrum, and at the same time, Aragon is becoming a DAO itself, finally, after like 5 years. So I'm also kind of living that experience of and the difficulties of us becoming a DAO very late.
Yeah, and to understand kind of where we're going and why DAOs are important, I think it's good to start with a little bit of background for the future, from the past state and where we're coming from. And can each of you expand a little bit on the organization behind the DAOs that they're incubating, kind of what started from the bootstrapping angle?
Yeah, I can start. So Aragon, it's a platform for DAOs. If you want to launch a DAO, you can use Aragon to do that. And there's around 5,000 DAOs that have set up using Aragon. This started about in 2017. But Aragon never was a DAO itself. It was always like, we need to build this and ship this, then we'll start working on governance, in 6 months' time and in 6 months' time, and that never happened. So really the decision got taken about 6 months ago to transition to a DAO. And we're in the process of setting that up. Right now, we're registered as a Swiss foundation, and we're going to move to a delegated governance model in the next months. So we have a set of core teams, like I work in one of the core teams on different products. And then we have kind of DAO contributors around that, but they haven't been very integrated so far. And now is the moment that we have to find ways to start integrating them. We've been doing different experiments and learning from how that goes. I'll try to share some the failures and good things today.
Yeah, I guess we're going in reverse order now. So Metric still almost happened by accident. Flipside was running analytics bounty programs, and Flipside Crypto is a kind of enterprise organization that's very good at working with other enterprise organizations like layer one blockchains and some very large protocols. But all of these other organizations started approaching Flipside that Flipside was so interested in working with, like really cool organizations like Uniswap, but just wasn't set up to deliver well on. And so we were like, oh, we should just like start a DAO that does this kind of thing too. And we did. And a year later, it's grown enormously, works with all kinds of any Web3 organization providing analytics and BI bounty services as well as data curation. And so we're at the point where like our baby's learning to walk and we actually have to start empowering it with more autonomy and decentralizing from it, which is going to be a really exciting journey.
Nice. Yeah, for us, where Maker is, I think we started almost, I don't say before any other DAO to not offend anyone, but in terms of size, we're probably one of the most developed ones. We definitely crossed the Dunbar number of 150 contributors, so it got really messy really fast. When we dissolved the foundation, we kind of put the horse in front of the carriage, in the sense that we started thinking about how teams can get funded to make sure that the transition was smooth. And we didn't realize that anything that's not active governance will kind of be left for no one to take. So with that in mind, we failed to focus the incentives on the work, and we kind of figured out that we were funding teams to do almost whatever they wanted. So now we have all these problems where it's much harder to direct the work. So we are funding teams, and potentially they can propose to do anything they want. And it's a very much yes or no discussion, instead of we really like these 3 points, but these other 7 points are not relevant right now. So we are trying to figure out methods to change that and to evolve from that. But right now, I think that our main issue is that the negotiation is very, very tough, in the sense that if those 3 points or 1 point is very, very critical, you cannot kind of like tell them no. So you're taking a 10% value for a 100% budget. And I think that's the main struggle we're dealing with nowadays.
Yeah, I think this highlights one of the things that we learned is that decentralization is really, it's a spectrum, and it's a timeline. So it doesn't happen all at once, and it's important to start creating a process and then iterating with it, experimenting, and then seeing what happens, and then learning from that, and then iterating again. So it's the same thing that happened at Celo Foundation as well. It's also a traditional entity that is structured as a foundation that's split off originally from the labs part, which was the technical side. And then now we're also experimenting, like, what does it look like to bootstrap the ecosystem with potentially like regional DAOs that will then just take over part of the budget and then grow the ecosystem in like one particular region. So it's kind of like a service DAO. But Meg, you touched on something really interesting, which is how do we give teams autonomy? And I think that's what's really important, what's really interesting about DAOs in general, and how they're different from traditional organizations. And I think while it's important that we don't reinvent the wheel entirely in terms of like operations for DAOs, I think it's also important how do we not repeat some of the mistakes and some of the shortcomings of traditional organizations. So how do you think about giving teams autonomy, and how do you think about the roadmap of decentralization? I also want to hear from other panelists as well, but yeah, let's start with just thinking about it.
Yeah. One of the first places that I'm starting is recruiting leaders into the DAO. And so people who have, who may not have been in DAOs previously, but have the organizational design and management capability that will be necessary for full DAO autonomy. Typically, the people who kind of show up to the DAO as contributors can be earlier in their career or less interested in the kind of management and organizational side of things, which is fantastic. We have so many of these like amazing contributors, and I want to set them up to succeed by bringing the right leaders in. And so one of the things that we're thinking through is like, what does bringing a, Web 2 manager into a DAO, it's like a leap from Web 2 into Web 3 and then another like moonshot into DAOs. And so how do we recruit the right kind of person and set them up for success so that like we're not just empowering the DAO with autonomy, but it starts with empowering the right individuals with autonomy to then build their teams and run things their way.
I'm really curious, like, did you find how to do that? Like, I would love to know how to do that.
I'm working on it. No, I mean, it's very much a work in progress. And we're in the stages of ironing out the process for it. Like, what are all the things we have to have in place in order to make that happen? And so one of them is legal status. So we incorporated as a Delaware non-stock nonprofit corporation so that we can offer more traditional legal protections to more senior employees. And next up is compensation and benefits. And so how do we offer like competitive VP level salaries in a DAO with the appropriate benefits?
To add some color to that picture, it's yeah, what we found, and going back to my initial point, I think that anything that's not very explicit, it will not be done by anyone. So if you tell the community will do it, someone will step up. Usually no one does. It's like, oh, someone else will do it, and you end up in this very weird situation where no one is taking care of that. So almost by design, I think that you need to forcefully say, okay, these are the important things that need to happen. We can iterate on them, but we need to be very careful of the power of default, of inertia, and try to set things up from the get-go. Otherwise, you will just, like the saying goes, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary solution, and you just get stuck with that. So, yeah, I don't know if in Sally had a similar situation.
Yeah, in terms of what?
In terms of how you're making sure that the community takes over anything that the foundation was previously doing.
Yeah. I think we're a little bit earlier on that spectrum in terms of like what functions the community is ready to take on or is interested in taking on. But actually, recently we've had several proposals because at Cello, so we have the foundation, and we also have the on-chain fund, which people can tap into via governance process and then get budget. And then to me, like one of the big autonomy pieces, which I'm also curious to hear from all of you, but to me, like one of the big pieces that you need is to have autonomy over a budget to be able to make decisions. It's like what kind of decision power do people have? Is like for me, it's really important to have decisions over budget and how you spend that budget, how you allocate it. So the DAOs that came up and proposed their proposals in the forum to tap into this on-chain fund are now having to propose like very detailed and very like concrete budgets. And actually, we've had two competing proposals, both for growing the community in India, come onto the governance call, and they compete like neck to neck about like what they're offering and essentially like what they're willing to do. So I think, yeah, the way that we're thinking about that is like what functions of community management and ecosystem growth are we ready to let go of and like essentially like let the community make better decisions of, because people on the ground know better where to allocate that budget. Like it's really hard to think about global level programs and where you should spend money, like where you should host hackathons, like where you should onboard developers. Whereas like people on the ground can make much better decisions about that. So yeah, I think that's
Plot twist, it was the same guy running two proposals at the same time.
they came on the governance call, so unless they had like completely different avatars, then I think it was maybe different people. But yeah, how do you think about what levels of autonomy and what decision power do people have in the DAOs that prioritize and keep it?
Well, I'm maybe not answering for Aragon internally, but we're supporting or we're powering DAOs with many, many diverse use cases and so on. And what we're seeing increasingly in like the best practice DAOs, some that I really like Radical or Cabin DAO, what they're doing is trying to find different types of decisions and have different types of governance for them, right? So in Cabin, if someone makes a proposal that's like just needs less than $200, it's just like, just do it. Like you don't need any approval. like that goes ahead. If it's less than like $10,000, okay, you need like a very light approval. That's going to happen with a multi-sig. And if you need something up to 100K, then it's going to be multi-sig plus a DAO vote, right? So like trying to make things so that you're not going to be stuck as a DAO, having to have huge votes every time you need to make a small decision. So once you start to see things like that, I think you start to see DAOs as like a permission management system, which is what we've been designing the new Aragon OS to do. It's basically permission management. So these type of decisions need this kind of governance, this kind of approval. Or I don't know, any kind of decision related with the marketing guild can be voted on by people in the marketing guild. So you can set like different roles and different voting types for different areas. I think this is kind of where all the DAOs are headed to.
So not the entire community votes on all of the decisions, but teams have their own autonomy to make.
Could be, right? Yeah. I mean, every DAO is different. And yeah, I think that's the general direction. But yeah, it will be up to you to decide and to be able to change that over time as you evolve. So maybe you start with like just really simple decisions and a really simple way of doing it, like wallet-based voting. You gradually move to like having token holders vote. You gradually move to having sub DAOs. This will happen bit by bit.
Yeah, I really love that. We do similar things with different permission levels corresponding with different levels of governance power. And so anyone in the community can give feedback on a governance proposal. They can participate in a temp check. And then as the vote proceeds to a more formal temp check or a formal approval, that's when we have pod leaders and governors who represent more senior and more highly permissioned levels of the organization with ultimate voting and veto power. And when we launch a token, TBD, we have our bylaws set up so that the token holders will continue to delegate their power to the slate of contributors and pod leaders that are elected each season so that we avoid token-based voting unless it's a very consequential matter for the DAO, something like dissolving the DAO being acquired or acquiring another organization, something like super consequential along those lines.
Yeah, so something that I a bit dislike about democracy is that eventually people are voting for things that they don't fully understand, and then they end up with Brexit being like, oh, we need to pay a tariff to go into Europe now. That's unfair. And it's like, well, you voted for that. So I think that the real question is how do we get the expertise to decide the things that are important? And something we're trying on the endgame plan coming soon, TM in Maker, is to create scopes which are a bit like frameworks, and the only way to change things or to go through things is to changing the scope. So you're only allowed to discuss the framework and not the thing. So potentially the framework is good enough, you can fully automate it and run it as software. But if you want to make any change, let's say someone proposes something that's too risky, it's like, okay, we didn't consider the risk, so we need to go back and change the framework. That does get blocked, but it's like you almost have to thank them for discovering like a hole in your framework. But you need to go back and change the framework and make sure that it's explicit for anyone to join. So I think that's something we're trying on. Looking forward to building those frameworks. I think it's a lot of work, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and what goes hand in hand with that is for governance to work effectively, like you have to cultivate a really engaged and informed governance community who's going to make informed decisions. So can you talk about maybe like some of the strategies and programs and ways that you've seen work well to cultivate an engaged and informed governance community? And I know at Maker, maybe we can start there because we just had a really interesting panel about delegates, and can you talk about how delegates play a really active role in governance?
Yeah, so we do have different programs that we tried with different rates of success. One of them was SourceCred, for example, which measures your activity on the forums or on whatever platform you want, and then you can decide to contribute. Of course, that was gained by a lot of farmers that were just posting very low quality posts just to get the monthly allowance. In terms of delegates, we had a panel earlier today. I think they're a key component of our whole governance system, and it's very interesting to see the interaction with the different teams, see how it works, and again, that's also an important part to tweak. What we were looking forward in terms of endgame plan is that not or no one person has all the expertise to go around all the topics for MakerDAO. So that's very, very complex in that sense. Maybe for other DAOs it's simpler, but in our case, you can have a discussion about oracles to something super technical, to economical parameters, to I don't know, marketing or real world assets. So you need to be almost an expert in everything. So what we're looking for, well, what we're looking to do is create these committees of delegates that they kind of like align on a strategy, and then each one creates an expertise on each, like branch, and then they can vote aligned in that sense. So that's something we're experimenting with soon.
Yeah, I'm super inspired by Maker's delegate model and loved the panel earlier.
In the industry.
That's what I hear.
There was a question.
Oh, right, but I think we answered it. I had a thought. This is perhaps a little controversial, but I feel like community governance participation is like swimming upstream. You can put so much effort into it and never really go anywhere. And so the delegate model and encouraging people to vote once for a leader or a delegate that they think aligns best with theirs. The analogy I heard during the US elections is like, treat voting like public transportation. Like, you're not voting for someone who is like the perfect candidate who like embodies everything that you think about. Like, you're voting for the quickest way to get to where you want to go. And so vote for that kind of delegate, and rather than trying to engage like the community in mass on every proposal.
Yeah, I'm not jealous of the job of the governance facilitator, but they play a really important role both in Maker and then also in communities like Radical. Governance facilitators, I think, play a really key role in developing that community. But Harry, maybe you can talk about how you've seen kind of like DAOs using Aragon to engage their governance community, and how you're thinking about engaging it for Aragon DAO moving forward.
I think maybe focusing on moving forward part. It has to become much easier to vote. So I mean, I've been thinking as we've been talking the last minutes, like, is there any good example? Like, is there anyone that we're really happy with the level of participation, or like, what do we expect? Because even the ones that have a really theoretically great governance structure, like Radical, it's like 20 people voting, or like 1% of people voting.
Do you think, like, in terms of amount of delegates or in terms of amount of tokens participating?
So with some of them, it will be like people that they know vote. It's like around 20 people. Or with the tokens, it could be. I mean, most protocols is what, like 2-3% of people voting.
Once we saw it happening, once you activate delegation, it goes much higher because some people want to like delegate and forget. And another thing that you need to think about is adding incentives. So if you don't, either you can, I don't know, inflation towards those that are delegating. So you're kind of like penalizing those not delegating in an indirect way. Or you can slash the ones that are not delegating or voting and say, okay, it's your responsibility. You have a governance token, so you should not free ride. So that's one of the things.
I think it can help. I'm curious about Maker. Like, with others, I've asked if they had like 2 or 3%. Maybe with delegation they got to 7%, something like that. It's like, what are we hoping for? With the level of participation, what is it like? What's our dream of how would a participatory community look like?
And something that Maker gets the critique of, it's super centralized. It's just like a couple actors voting. But I think that the dormant tokens also have the opportunity to vote. So you have to kind of assume that if they are not voting it, they are at least content with the direction that it's taking. Like, when you're not voting in a democracy, it's a bit the same thing. It's not less of a democracy because people are not going to vote. So that the centralized thing for me, it's like, okay, I don't fully buy it.
No, fair enough. And so trying to turn it more positive, like, what can we do to increase these numbers? I think one big part is making it simpler for people to follow what's happening in the DAO and to vote. And I think then there's many sub problems of that. One of them will be that the information is spread across many places. You have to follow on Discord, you have to vote in Snapshot, then you have to vote on Chain. So one of the things that we're working on is, I don't know if Liam is here in the audience. Well, at Aragon, he's head of design. He's working on how to kind of bring all of this together in really easy app, so it's much easier to participate. I think this is like a small and quick win we can do to try and make things easier.
Yeah, I hate to come off as or I don't want to come off as like a dictator, but the idea that like 7% of people vote in like really high participation governance proposals just makes me think like we're not going to win this battle. Like the KPI for effective governance should not be the percentage of people who vote, because like even if we tripled that, like we go to 20%, still nothing. And rather that we are able to make good decisions efficiently and effectively, and that's really what we should be optimizing for.
Yeah, much of the good stuff that's going on is not, it's not about the tool, it's not about the DAO tooling, right? It's about like all of the soft governance that goes on around what's the culture that you're building as an organization. And the ones that work really well are the ones that do that from day one, like engaging their community to build together. It's really hard. I think it's really hard to just start that like halfway along.
I want to disagree with you, Meg, just to make the panel more fun. But I think that the power of DAOs and what we're going to be seeing in the coming future is the opportunity to actually exit a DAO. So I think that if someone is holding a token for better and worse, even if they're not fully participating, they kind of do agree in a sense. So yeah, for me, it's more like we need to add these incentives. I don't think we've seen it yet, or maybe in smaller scales, to make people either delegate to some default contract, which is like, I don't want to participate kind of thing, like I don't care. But yeah, ideally you do get people that are more involved. But I think that people holding the token means at least like acceptance to the current situation. So I think that's the actual power of DAOs, not the actual voting and being there all the time in every Discord. Like I belong to 25 DAOs. For me, it's not the flex that people think it is. But
How do you exit the DAO?
you sell the token.
Sell a token. As long as you're holding the governance token, you're still part of the DAO. Mike and I were talking about this earlier.
Yeah, I was just like philosophically re-examining how many DAOs I'm part of. It's a little higher than I thought earlier today.
I guess it also depends a lot on the type of DAO, right? Like service DAOs, you would expect them to be super participatory. Like DeFi protocols, maybe it doesn't matter, right? Like they're there to not change too often, and they're there to like only vote if something big needs to change, right?
Yeah, I want to spend the last few minutes kind of talking about like what are you most excited about DAOs and what are some of the new things that you're working on and anything that it just makes you really excited to work on DAOs right now and really lights you up. Anyone's welcome to start.
I'm really excited about service DAOs. I feel like over the last couple of months, this new model for DAOs has emerged, and the time is right for it to gain a lot of traction. The idea that a DAO can be a home for really talented workers who are less interested in working for a particular company or a particular client and more using their talents in a like flexible way that replaces the role of traditional management consulting or the gig economy feels super powerful. And as we watch all of these tech companies lay off such talented workers, it just feels like the talent is there and the market is ready for disruption. And so watching service DAOs start to form and grow just makes me super excited.
Yeah, I'm excited on the two extremes of the spectrum that Aragon is working on. So like on the protocol side, I think it's really exciting, this idea of like a DAO as a permission management tool, being able to make it much more modular setup and really make like a system that runs on its own. So that's on the Aragon OS side. I think we're very excited about that. And then on the other side, I think you have like on the much more like mainstream side, I think you have a new generation of entrepreneurs that it's easier than ever to make a business, right? To build a product. You can build a product in a few weeks on your own. Like you can launch something, but you don't want to manage a company. And like just having this really easy way to set up an organization as a DAO, I think is really powerful. And yeah, that's what we're excited about on the Aragon app side, is like anyone building a Web3 product rather than a protocol, just like really quickly get going with something simple and like evolve it and add more complexity over time.
Yeah, I'm thinking leverage. So I think that DAOs are the next leverage in terms of organization. So we saw this in the sports where athletes get like more like professional and stronger, and someone from nowadays it's like 100 times better than someone from 30, 40 years ago. And I think the same is happening in organizations when we go from remote. So the better remote companies are much better than one that is not, and the worse are much worse. So I think that's why companies are forcing employees to come back to the office, because they're not good enough to distribute work to make it remote. And I think that once it clicks what DAOs are, it will be we will have much more leverage over organizations that are slower to move. They're not as modular, as composable. So I'm really looking forward to the next generation of DAOs.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have just a couple of minutes. If we have any questions from the audience, happy to take some. Yes. But just wait for the mic because you need it to be recording.
I can repeat the question if you want to.
Hi, and thank you. A quick question about metrics. How many people actually are familiar with the votes that are taking place? Do you know how many people on the MakerDAO forum actually read it that are holders? Do you have any such metrics to see, like, if they understand that this is important? Because I own an MKR. I voted sometimes, not very often. And oftentimes I don't really know that there's a vote going on that I care about, because their social circles are not there. I care about Maker because it provides me DAI, and that's pretty much it, right? And if there's more to it, of course, I want to learn about it, but I don't know how many people actually learn. Like, is it 3% because 4% of people know about these votes, or is it 3% while 95% of people know about these votes? And do we have any such metrics?
I know the question was for metrics, though, but so the short answer, and maybe Peyton can provide more color from GoAlpha, so he probably has the stats top of mind. I'm not sure if you're asking about how many people are aware and not voting. I think that's a harder measurement to get. We do have information on how many people are actually voting. We have the voting portals, vote.makedao.com, and there you have all the stats, how many active voters. There's a bunch of panels, dashboards, being created by GoAlpha, so that gives us a bit more of insight. But yeah, I don't know if you're interested about I can either show you the dashboards after the panel, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't have exact numbers off the top of my head, and we don't have a token, so the denominator is a little bit wonky to give you exact percentages. I feel like as a DAO operator, I'm like screaming from the rooftops every time we have a governance vote. Like, it's on Twitter, it's on Discord, like telling everyone I know. And so the former product manager in me wants to know, how would you like to be informed about upcoming governance votes, and what's the ideal way for you to participate?
I'd like to get paid to vote.
Noted.
Well, this is something we were talking about in delegates panel. Yeah, I wanted to let Juan maybe answer about how is Maker thinking about incentivizing people to delegate and incentivizing people to vote?
So right now there's a relatively simple and also relatively complicated curve where you do get paid for being a delegate in Maker. It's capped at 144K per year DAI, which I think it's not bad, especially considering that a lot of the delegates are part-time. That said, you do need to have the weight from the MKR holders to actually get that amount of MKR delegated to you, but delegates do get voted, and I think that the formula allows for smaller delegates to actually come and start getting some kind of compensation and DAI to start working from there. But there is some compensation already in Maker.
Hey, have you guys given any thought to the social choice theory behind governance proposals? So, like quadratic voting versus, first past the post, or any of those different systems. Have you guys thought about that? Do you guys have any preferences between those options?
I do really like ranked choice voting, and introducing the option to make votes less binary and black and white. Other options I haven't studied in depth, but my brief opinion is that the harder you make governance to understand, the lower your participation is going to be, and the less informed people's choices are going to be. So Like ranked choice is always my preference, but beyond that, it just feels like it obfuscates the process.
Yeah, my answer is like don't have a strong opinion because I think at Aragon we have like a research team that's like also really strong on governance research and theory. But in the end, like we can't be overly opinionated because every DAO is going to have their own beliefs and it's going to be different case for them. So we just try to make as many options possible.
I do have a strong opinion. No, I think quadratic voting is great for things like public goods. So Gitcoin Passport is a great example of how to solve for civil resistance. But with that in mind, we had this discussion in Maker. Should we put some kind of quadratic voting and like we are in a plutocracy in MakerDAO. It's not a democracy. So if you have more skin in the game, you have more of the upside and also the downside. So that's something that potentially we want to keep. But yeah, then I'd like to echo Meg. We do like ranked choice voting as well to arrive to some kind of consensus.
Do you think that this kind of like democratic consensus is really the ideal way to steer organizations, because it seems awfully slow and
No.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree.
No, I think I said it, but I think that we need the experts in the like steering wheel. You don't want to vote with the passengers of a flight how to land the plane or I don't know, the doctor coming out of the operating room and should we cut the appendix or not? It's like, you tell me, you're the experts. We put you in that position for that. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of the democratic voting in general.
Yeah, I do think there are times when it's not a total scam and there are genuine issues that like impact everyone in the DAO and those should go up for a public or popular vote, but those are the exception.
I'm curious if any of you have any favorite governance theorists or kind of frameworks for how you think about making decisions.
Ouch. I think I'll pass. That's no. I've I don't know. I listened to many podcasts to try to get the theory. I think there's a huge divide between the philosophers of DAOs of how I don't know we should copy nature or work towards empowering and all these buzzwords which sound great and you hear the theory and it's like awesome and then you're like, how do I implement that to my DAO? And it's like, okay, there's a huge step or lack of common understanding of how these things would actually be implemented. And then with that in mind, it's extremely hard. But yeah, we need to work on that. There are tools coming out almost every week. We get pitched for a different tool to make our DAO better. Some are very young, some are. We see that there's a lot of potential. So I think it's a matter of experimenting and finding a way of finding these new ways of working.
Yeah, I actually, governance theory in general tends to drive me a little bit nuts. But where I like to draw learnings from is more from the human behavior and psychology of decision making side, which feels like it leans more towards people's like natural tendency to act and in the interest of like swimming downstream rather than upstream allows us to create systems that will actually be used.
If you're fishing for a name, I've been reading a lot of Nathan Schneider. I think he's from the University of Colorado lately. He co-published with Vitalik and stuff, so I think he's very good.
Yeah, I really like stuff from outside the Web3 space. So I think self-management, the whole self-management movement has been trying to do this stuff for like ages and they're way far ahead of anyone. So I think great organizations are like Greater Than and Inspiral, full of really good people who know what they're doing.
Yeah, on the organizational theory side, Reinventing Organizations is a great book that I think DAOs can learn a lot from.
and even traditional organizations like the Cell Foundation itself is really inspired by inventing organizations and also works in like a teal organization manner. So yeah, I think there's also some organization principles in traditional organizations that aren't DAOs.
Yeah, there's an organization called The Ready. One of the founders published a book called Brave New Work, which great title, great book. And I think DAOs can learn a lot like from organizations like that.
Any other questions?
Yes, I'm coming from a very traditional point of view, being a corporate lawyer. Many of the things that you discuss remind me an awful lot about the discussions we have every day. You know, do you have proxy voting? Why are many people not voting, not showing up? They're just there for the increase in the share value, these kind of things. Who has more votes? Are there share classes, privileged shares, and all these things? And to me, it sounds, and this is not a question, it's a statement, as if this is a more granular kind of shareholder assembly that you have there. But is there anything, and it would be very interesting to me, that the DAO can do in a qualitative way that the shareholder assembly, a shareholder meeting cannot do? I mean, where it goes beyond what we have right now, not just making what we have more liquid, better, faster, stronger, but you know, going beyond that. Is there anything that you guys see?
That's a like super excellent question, and I'll get the conversation started by taking a stab at it. Explicitly, the way that Metrics DAO's governance is formed and the DAO is incorporated is in the exact same guidelines as traditional organizations use. And that's because we're using the same incorporation structure, and we have to because there's nothing else if we want to be legally incorporated. I do think that DAOs, to pick up our thread around different organizational designs and structures and teal organizations, there's so much DAOs can do at the social layer to make decision making less hierarchical and to promote more ownership and autonomy within individuals in the organization.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is qualitative, because I think the whole space of like, is it making better decisions? Is it better deliberation? I'm not sure if, and I think that's like a totally untouched space in DAOs right now. There could be loads of improvement there. But maybe what's different is just like being open to someone coming forward with a proposal out of anywhere. Like, I mean, Aragon in the last year, the best thing we did was like a proposal just came out of nowhere from a team that's been following Aragon for a couple of years called Blossom Labs. They made this amazing tool called EVM CRISPR, which builds in Aragon and makes it way easier to use. They just came out of nowhere with a proposal like 70K, let's do this. We'll deliver it in 6 weeks and got it done. So I think this doesn't happen in normal organizations, like that someone just appears and gets something done like that. You don't think so?
It depends very much on the organization, but yeah, I mean, if it makes this easier, this process, then that's of course a good thing. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, obviously.
Yeah. So I don't see it on the deliberation side, but maybe on the proposal side, there's more openness to get things happening. Oh, maybe one other, now that I'm rambling. Another one would be like just collab. Maybe it's a cultural thing in DAOs, but just the level of collaboration. So there's a really cool space in Barcelona called Giveth House. If you go there, which is like a crypto hacker house. If you go there, you'll see people from like Ethereum Foundation working next to people from Polygon, someone from Aragon, and they're all working on the same stuff and swapping what they're doing. You would never see that with like companies like someone from Airbnb and Facebook sitting next to each other, exchanging what they're working on. So it might be partly cultural, but this is like definitely happening in DAOs.
Yeah, the two things DAOs do differently that makes them operate very differently, even in the same structures that you articulated, is one, transparency. And so these conversations and these decisions happen in public, and that helps you be more aware of the motivations that drive these decisions and the outcomes that people are looking for when they make these decisions. And the second one is ownership. And so at Twitter, if I'm not Elon Musk, I don't get a say in anything that goes on. Twitter was a DAO and I'm an engineer there. My vote and Elon Musk's vote carry the same weight, and that is radically different.
That said, if there's any project trying to find a problem to solve, please make it strategy and consensus building, because I think there's tools for everything except finding the North Star of a DAO. So yeah, I think that's where we're massively missing the mark nowadays.
Yeah, I really have to agree with the cultural shift. And it's like there's a technical protocol, but there's also a social protocol, and I think the social protocols of DAOs do radically different. And I was kind of thinking about this also about why DAOs when I was having like a bit of existential crisis recently, like thinking about like really like what does it mean to make better decisions, and is better faster? Is it more efficient? And the answer that came across, at least for me, that feels satisfactory is like it's more resilient. Because if you have a diverse set of perspectives, if you have the ability to make proposals, if you have the ability to give people autonomy and ownership, then you're gonna have a more resilient ecosystem. And so, like sometimes maybe it's not the most efficient if you want to get things done fast. But I do think that it's more resilient, and I do think there's a cultural shift. And to me, that's really interesting and really compelling.
Okay. I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for all the contributions you made on the panel today to everyone here. And thank you guys all for being here.